Wyoming Territory, June 1877, the day the town turned its back on Willa Norwood. The sun beat down hard on the dirt streets of Three Pines, and no one met her eyes as she passed holding a baby wrapped in a dead man's coat. Willa did not look down. She held her chin high, though her arms ached from the weight of the child and the shame people tried to hang on her like a noose. The baby fussed, hungry again. She adjusted her grip, whispering soft sounds against his downy head. "It is all right, little one. I have you." The boy's father, Levy, had died 2 nights prior, throat torn open by a cougar in the foothills above the Norwood homestead. He had been Willa's neighbor, nothing more, but when he staggered into her barn with the infant in his arms, blood pouring down his chest, he had begged her with his last breath. "Please, take him. His name's Kellen. He is all I have." Willa had taken the baby from his arms just before his body went still. Now the town called her tainted for it, said it was a sin, a woman living alone, holding a man's child who was not her husband. They whispered that she had seduced Levy, that the baby was hers by blood and lies, though anyone with eyes could see the boy's dark curls and olive skin shared none of Willa's pale hair or blue eyes. She had gone into town for milk and cloth. The storekeeper's wife wouldn't meet her gaze. The pastor's wife turned her back. Even old Mr. Briggs, who had once spoken kindly to her, stared like she had grown horns. She was halfway down Main Street when a man stepped out from the livery and stopped her in her tracks. He was covered in trail dust, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, long legs planted firm in the dirt. The kind of man who looked like he carried his own storms behind his eyes. His horse stood tied behind him, sweat glistening on its flanks. He looked right at her, not through her, not over her. "At her, you need a hand," he asked. The voice was low, steady. It did not shake the way people's voices did when they were trying to be polite and still keep their distance. Willa hesitated. "No, you sure? That baby looks near out of patience." She shifted Kellen in her arms. He had begun to cry again, mouth open wide, fists clenched. "I said I am fine." He took one slow step closer. "My name's Archer Tilden. I just rode in from the Flat Iron Range, was looking for something to eat, maybe a place to sleep." Willa narrowed her eyes. "You offering help or asking for it?" "Both, maybe." She waited. He kept his hands at his sides, made no move closer. He just looked at her like he saw the truth of things. "Who does he belong to?" he asked finally, nodding toward the baby. Willa's jaw tightened. "A man named Levy." "He is dead. You his wife?" "No." "Then why are you carrying his child?" Her voice was razor thin. "Because I was the only one there when he died." The street around them had gone quiet. The town was watching. Archer glanced once at the storefronts, then back to her. "Well," he said, stepping up beside her without asking, "he ain't just yours anymore." Willa blinked. "What?" He reached out, slow as sunrise, and brushed the baby's cheek with the back of his knuckle. "That's our child now." The words hit like a hammer to the chest. Willa stared at him, stunned. Kellen stopped crying. The baby's tiny fingers curled around Archer's thumb, and the cowboy's face softened just enough to show it was not a line he had thrown for show. Willa's throat tightened. "You do not know me." "No," he said, "but I know what it is to be left behind. And I know that boy deserves more than being passed around like a burden no one wants." Her feet did not move, but something inside her cracked open just a little. "Why would you do this?" He looked at her then, really looked, and said, "Because someone should have done it for me." They walked to her wagon together. She did not say yes, not out loud, but she let him lift the milk can into the back and take the reins when her arms trembled too much to hold them. By the time they reached her homestead, the baby had fallen asleep in Archer's arms. Willa made supper with her back stiff and her guard high. Archer sat quiet at the table, feeding the baby with a steady hand, never asking questions. When she laid out a blanket for him by the hearth, he thanked her like it was a gift. That night, Willa stood at the doorway of her bedroom and watched the stranger sleep with Kellen curled up against his chest, both of them breathing slow and even. She had not meant to need anyone. But the sight of them, their man and child safe and warm, did something to her ribs. A week passed. Then another. Archer never left. He fixed the barn roof without being asked, helped her dig a new well when the old one ran dry. He never tried to take over, but he never let her shoulder more than she had to, either. They did not speak of love. Not yet. But one evening, as the sun slipped low and turned the sky gold over the hills, Willa caught Archer watching her from the porch. Not like a man who wanted to possess, but like one who had found something he never thought he would see again. And when she walked over and stood beside him, he reached for her hand without needing to ask. She let him take it. Neither of them said a word. But the silence between them felt full, like the start of something that might last. The wind came down from the hills that morning with a breath like snowmelt, cool, damp, edged with pine. Archer was out early, mending the north fence where elk had pressed through during the night. Willa stood in the doorway, Kellen on her hip, watching his figure move along the ridge with a sure pace. He carried a coil of wire over one shoulder and a hammer tucked through his belt, his shirt damp with sweat already, though the sun had barely cleared the horizon. Kellen reached for the light with a soft sound, fingers curling toward the sky. Willa kissed the curve of his head and stepped back inside. The house had grown quieter since Archer came. Not empty, never that, but steadier. The kind of quiet that held, not the kind that haunted. She laid Kellen in the cradle Archer had built from pine boards he'd planed smooth by hand. The corners were rounded, the joints snug, no nails but wooden pegs, and it rocked with the softest push. Willa hadn't asked for it. He hadn't asked if he should. One morning it had just been there beside her bed, warm from the shaping. When Archer returned near noon, his hands were scraped and his boots caked in mud. She met him at the well with a dipper of water and a cloth, and he drank without a word, then wiped the back of his neck. "Fence'll hold," he said, still catching his breath. "For a while, anyhow," she nodded and poured more water. "You'll need to go into town soon. Supplies are running low." His eyes flicked toward her, shaded under the brim of his hat. "I can ride in tomorrow." "I'll make a list," she said, and turned back toward the house. He followed slow, his boots scuffing across the packed earth. Inside, Kellen was awake, fussing again. Archer lifted him before Willa could reach, bouncing gently on his arm as he walked toward the back room. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked, voice quiet. Willa paused at the table, fingers still on the flour tin. "What do you mean, for him? For us?" He touched Kellen's hand with his thumb, then looked up. "We're not just passing time anymore, are we?" She stared at the window, light breaking through the muslin curtain in long gold lines. "I know what people say. I know what they'll keep saying. I don't give a damn about them." "I do," she said, turning toward him. "Not for me, but for Kellen. He'll hear it someday and he'll carry it, whether we want him to or not." Archer rocked the baby in slow rhythm. "Then we give him something stronger to hold on to." He said it like a promise, not a plan. Willa watched him a long moment, then moved to slice bread from the round loaf she'd baked at dawn. That night, thunder rolled in from the west, low and distant. Rain tapped the roof and slid down the windows. Archer lit the lamp and trimmed the wick while Willa bundled Kellen against her shoulder, humming a tune her mother had once sung when storms shook the rafters. "You ever miss it?" Archer asked, watching her from the hearth. "Where you came from?" "I miss the trees," she said. "And the sound of frogs at night. I don't miss the way folks looked through me like I wasn't theirs." He nodded once, slow. "I left behind a sister in Missouri. She was older, fierce, raised me more than Ma did. You right her, haven't in years. She married a man who didn't take kindly to me." Willa didn't press. Instead, she handed Kellen to him and pulled her shawl tighter. "Storm's moving fast. He'll sleep better against you." Archer took the boy with practiced ease, settling into the rocker by the fire. Kellen curled into his chest like he belonged there. Willa sat nearby, not speaking, just listening to the creak of the chair and the rain against the roof. When the lamp burned low, Archer looked up. "You think he'd be proud of us?" "Levy," Willa didn't answer right away. Then, quiet as the rain, she said, "I think he'd be glad his son is safe." They didn't speak again that night, but when Willa rose to head to bed, she paused at Archer's side. Her hand rested on his shoulder for a breath longer than needed. He looked up and their eyes met. This time, she didn't look away. The first frost came early that year. Not a hard freeze, but enough to silver the grass and whiten the fence rails, enough to make Willa's fingers stiff as she gathered eggs in the morning haze. She'd taken to wrapping the baby in an old wool shawl, nestling him against her chest as she worked. He stayed quiet there, warm and close, his breath a soft rhythm beneath her chin. Archer had gone to the river with the mule and 2 empty barrels. The well still held, but he'd said they ought not to rely too heavily on it once the ground hardened. He'd left just after dawn, promising to be back by midday. Willa kept busy while he was gone. The sourdough had risen well, and she baked 3 loaves, setting them to cool near the window. She sliced the last of the dried venison for stew and laid out a patched shirt of Archer's that needed mending. The quiet inside the house felt different now. Not empty. Expectant. When Archer returned, his coat was damp with river spray and his boots soaked through. He carried 1 barrel under each arm, his shoulders taut with cold and effort. "You should have taken the sled," Willa said, stepping aside as he passed into the lean-to. "Would have taken longer," he replied, teeth barely unclenched. "Didn't want to miss the daylight." She handed him a towel and waited as he dried his hands and face. He looked worn through, but his grin came easy when Kellen reached for him from the blanket on the floor. "You'll be walking before spring," he said, lifting the boy in 1 arm. "Mark my words." Willa folded the towel over the rail. "You always so certain of things?" "Only when I know I'm right." She glanced at him, then back to the hearth. "I had a letter once from Levy's kin. Didn't know he had any, but it came through the preacher, a cousin in Nebraska. Said they couldn't take the boy, too many mouths already." Archer's brow furrowed. "You never told me." "I didn't see the need. They weren't offering care, just excuses." He shifted Kellen to his hip and leaned against the table. "He's got a home now." "That's what matters," she nodded, but her eyes stayed on the fire. "I keep thinking about what he'll ask someday when he's old enough to know what death is. He'll ask why we took him in. And what will we say?" Archer's voice dropped low. "That we chose him, that he was never a burden. That he was the start of something neither of us saw coming but wouldn't give up for anything." Willa's throat caught, but she held his gaze. "You say that like you mean it." "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." The room felt smaller suddenly, filled with more than lamplight and wood smoke. Willa crossed to the cupboard and took down a jar of beans, her hands steady though her heart beat louder for it. As they prepared supper, Archer scraped mud from his boots near the door and spoke without looking up. "There's a man in town, Harlan Price. Owns the feed store." "I know him," Willa said. "He's the one told the others to stop trading with me after Levy died." Archer nodded slowly. "He said something when I was there last. That a woman with no husband and a child not her own shouldn't be left alone on a spread like this." Willa's jaw set tight. "He's always been a coward, hiding behind righteousness. I didn't take kindly to it." "You didn't start trouble?" "No," Archer said. "But I made it clear you weren't alone." Willa lowered the spoon into the pot and turned. "You mean that I'm not?" He stepped toward her, Kellen still tucked safe against his chest. "I meant it the first day I said it." There was a silence that followed, not heavy but full. Willa moved slowly, reaching out to brush a curl from Kellen's brow. Her hand lingered. "I've been carrying so much alone," she said. "You don't have to anymore." Her eyes lifted to his, and neither of them looked away. That night, after the dishes were washed and the fire banked low, Willa brought a second quilt from the chest and laid it over the cot by the hearth. Archer had already settled there, Kellen asleep beside him. As she turned to go, his hand caught hers. "Stay," he said. She hesitated. Then she sat at the edge of the cot and leaned back, her shoulder touching his, the child between them, warm and safe. Outside, the frost thickened on the windows. Inside, the quiet held steady, the kind that didn't ask for words, just presence, just promise. The snow came down hard in early November, blowing in thick across the flats and drifting heavy against the fence lines. By midday, the wind had gone still. but the quiet it left behind felt like something sacred, like the world had paused to listen. Willa stood inside the barn, holding a lantern high as Archer threw a saddle blanket over the new foal born just before dawn. The mare lay nearby, breathing slow but steady, her coat slick with sweat. Archer's hands moved careful and firm, his breath rising in clouds that caught the lantern glow. "She's strong," he said. "Stubborn, too. Took 3 hours to get her to lie down." "You remind me of someone then," Willa said, setting the lantern on the hook beside the door. Archer glanced over, a faint line of amusement in his eyes. "You saying I'm stubborn?" "I didn't say it out loud," she replied, brushing straw from her skirts. "But I'm not denying it." He huffed something close to a laugh, then knelt to check the foal's legs. "We'll need to bring them both inside tonight. If the wind picks up again, this barn won't hold the warmth." "I'll clear a corner in the lean-to," Willa said. "Blankets, maybe a bedroll between them." Archer rose and stretched his back, joints cracking faintly. "You always been this prepared." "Not always," she said, "but I learned. When you have no one else to count on, you make sure nothing gets missed." He watched her a moment, then wiped his hands on his coat. "You've had to carry too much alone." Willa didn't respond right away. Instead, she crossed to the mare and laid a hand on her flank, steadying her as she shifted. "I never expected company that stayed." "Well," Archer said, stepping beside her, "you've got it now." As they walked back toward the house, the snow crunching under their boots, Willa glanced sideways. "You ever think about leaving again?" "Not lately," he said. "Not since I found a place that doesn't feel borrowed." Inside, the fire was low and the windows furred with frost. Kellen was asleep in his cradle, one hand curled near his cheek. Willa knelt to check the blankets, tucking them tighter around his legs. Archer poured water from the kettle into a basin and scrubbed the dirt from his hands, then dried them on the hem of his shirt. "I saw something odd out near the west fence," he said quietly. "Tracks, not deer or elk, looked like a man on foot, maybe two." They circled wide and didn't come close, but they were fresh. Willa stood slowly. "You think they're watching?" "Could be nothing," he said. "Could be someone looking for shelter. But I don't like them circling." She crossed to the cupboard and pulled down the rifle, checking the chamber before setting it by the door. "If they're hungry, they'll come closer. If they're not, they'll move on." Archer nodded. "I'll take first watch tonight." Willa turned to him. "You don't have to do everything yourself." "I know," he said, "but I want to." Later, after supper, Willa brought out a stack of mending and settled near the hearth. Archer sat across from her, oiling the hinges on the front door. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the soft ticking of the mantel clock. Willa spoke without looking up. "When I was little, I used to think if I kept quiet enough, people wouldn't notice me. I thought that was safer. And now," she threaded a needle, then met his eyes. "Now I think silence can be a kind of prison." Archer leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're not invisible here, Willa." "I know," she said. "That's what scares me." He sat back, the firelight playing across his face. "I won't walk away, not from you, not from him." Her hands stilled. "Even if folks keep talking." "I've been called worse than a fool," he said. "And I've lived through it." The wind rose again outside, brushing against the eaves like a whisper. Willa stood and crossed to the cradle, lifting Kellen gently. She held him close, then turned toward Archer. "There's room in my bed," she said, voice steady. "It's warmer with two." He stood. "You sure?" She stepped aside, waiting. "Yes." They moved through the quiet house together, past the cracked wash basin and the drying herbs, past the worn floorboards and the stacked firewood. The door to her room creaked open and the lamplight spilled across the quilt. By morning, the snow had stopped, and the world outside gleamed untouched. Inside, the warmth held 3 bodies breathing as one. The snow held for 5 days, then melted slow beneath a stretch of pale sun. The land turned to wet clay, and the creek behind the house ran high with runoff. Archer built a low stone wall along the back edge of the yard to keep the water from reaching the porch, and Willa stitched a set of cloth diapers from old flour sacks while Kellen slept swaddled in the basket beside her chair. On the 6th morning, a rider came up the road. Willa saw the movement from the window and stepped outside, her sleeves rolled and her apron dusted with flour from the morning's biscuits. Archer was chopping kindling near the shed. He looked up when she did, axe still raised, brow drawn low. The man wore a gray coat and had the lean, stiff-backed posture of someone raised on hard land. He carried no badge, but his silence as he dismounted spoke the kind of authority that didn't need emblems. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat to Willa, then glancing toward Archer. "Looking for a man named Tilden. Archer Tilden." Archer stepped forward, wiping his palms down his thighs. "That's me. Name's Emmett Rourke. I ride for Judge Carver out of Laramie. There's word come through from Missouri. Your sister passed 2 months ago, left behind a girl. 11 summers old." Archer's jaw moved, but no sound came. Willa stepped beside him, quiet but rooted. "She had no husband?" Archer finally asked, voice rough. "Gone near 4 years. No kin left but you." "What's the girl's name?" "Joda, goes by Joe. She's with a traveling preacher's family for now, but they're moving east again come spring." Willa placed her hand at Archer's back. "Where is she now?" "Just south of Cheyenne. I was passing through and thought it best to say it myself." "You did right," Archer said. "Thank you." The man nodded once, mounted again, and rode on without another word. Inside the house, the kettle boiled dry while Willa and Archer stood by the window, not speaking. Then Archer turned, slow and sure. "I have to go to her." Willa nodded. "Of course you do." He looked down at his hands. "I haven't seen her since she was a toddler. She doesn't know me." "She'll know you're hers," Willa said. "That's enough to start." "I'll be gone near a week," he said. "Maybe longer." "I'll keep things here," she said. "You know that." He stepped closer, eyes searching hers. "Do you want this life with me, Willa? Not just tending land and raising Kellen. I mean everything. The hard days. The decisions we don't see coming." She reached up and brushed her fingers along his cheek. "I haven't known peace like this since I was a girl, and I've never known a man I'd trust to carry the weight beside me." Archer's breath left him slow, and he leaned in, forehead to hers. "I'll bring her home." He left the next morning before dawn with a satchel packed light and a rifle across his saddle. Kellen cried as Archer bent to kiss his head, but quieted when Willa hummed low and soft. She watched Archer ride out until the trees swallowed him. The days passed quiet. Willa kept to the routine, feeding the animals, boiling laundry, rocking Kellen through the long blue shadows of dusk. She didn't let herself wonder too hard. She just waited. On the 8th day, Willa stood at the edge of the yard splitting kindling when she saw 2 riders crest the hill. Archer's figure was unmistakable, and beside him rode a thin girl with a braid like a whip and a chin held high. Willa didn't run. She stood her ground, wiping her hands on her apron as they drew near. Archer dismounted first, then turned to help the girl down. Joda looked at Willa like someone measuring the worth of a stranger. Willa knelt to her level. "You hungry?" The girl blinked, then nodded once. "I've got stew on and biscuits still warm." Joda glanced at Archer, then back at Willa. "Do you have a place for me?" Willa reached out and brushed a leaf from the girl's shoulder. "I've had it ready since the day you were born." That night, the house held 4 souls. Joda ate 3 biscuits without speaking, then curled up on the cot with Kellen's old quilt tucked over her knees. Archer sat beside Willa on the porch, the stars sharp above the pines. "She's bold," he said. "She's yours," Willa answered. He turned toward her. "You're sure, Willa, you want all of this? A child not yours, a man with a past. A life that won't ever be simple." She leaned into his side, resting her head against his shoulder. "I want the days that follow this one, the ones we haven't seen yet." He kissed the top of her head, and they sat that way a long while, the house behind them silent and full. Come spring, they married beneath the cottonwood tree out back, with no preacher but the land itself and a ring Archer had carved from elk bone. Joda stood beside them in a dress Willa had sewn from old curtains, Kellen in Archer's arms, clapping at the wind. They didn't need witnesses. The land bore it. The sky bore it. And the quiet between them had already said more than vows ever could. They planted a second row of beans that year, and Archer built a bench beneath the porch eaves. Joda started lessons with the schoolteacher in town, riding in twice a week with Willa. Kellen learned to walk across the packed dirt of the yard, always with one hand reaching back toward whoever followed. They never left the homestead. There was no need. Everything they had was already there, earned across hard seasons, quiet mornings, and the kind of love that took root slow but held fast through every wind.